She isn't moving. The group has gathered, 7 of them, standing in a loose, uncertain cluster around her. They shift their weight from foot to foot. They glance at the body, then away, then back again. One of the younger ones reaches out and touches her shoulder, gently, almost experimentally, as if testing whether she'll wake. She won't. 4.2 million years ago, on the edge of a prehistoric lake in what is now northern Kenya, death visited a group of our earliest ancestors. And what they did next, how they responded, what it meant to their survival, what it reveals about us, has never been more important to understand. Because what happened in that clearing didn't just determine whether this group lived or died. It set in motion a chain of behaviour that over millions of years would become the most defining thing about our species. What did the first hominids do when one of them died? The creature lying still on the forest floor belongs to a species called Australopithecus anamensis, a name drawn from the word Anam, meaning lake in the Turkana language. It is a fitting origin. Everything about her life was shaped by water. She is not quite human, but she is not quite an ape either. Standing just under 4.5 feet tall and weighing perhaps 100 to 110 pounds, she walked upright on 2 legs, her shin bones angled in a way so structurally similar to your own that if you saw only the tibia, you would think it belonged to a small, modern human. That bone, found by paleontologist Brian Patterson at Kanapoy in 1965, was in fact the very first piece of her species ever identified. A single fragment of lower leg, lying in the Kenyan soil for more than 4 million years, waiting. And yet, for all her bipedalism, she is unmistakably ancient. Her arms hang long, built for climbing, for hauling herself into trees when the dark comes and the savanna becomes a death sentence. Her jaw is wide and powerful, packed with thick enamelled molars designed not for meat, but for the hard seeds, woody roots, and tough, fibrous plants of a woodland environment. Her brain, approximately 365 cubic centimetres, sits behind heavy brow ridges in a skull that slopes back sharply. That brain is barely larger than a chimpanzee's, and yet it was enough. Her species was formally named in 1995, following excavations led by paleoanthropologist Meev Leakey at Kanapoy and Alia Bay along the eastern shore of Lake Turkana. Since then, nearly 100 specimens spanning more than 20 individuals have been recovered. Teeth, jaw fragments, limb bones, skull pieces. Each one a fragment of a life lived at the very edge of human possibility. In 2019, a near-complete cranium discovered at Woranzo Mille in Ethiopia gave scientists the first full look at the face of Anamensis, a strange and striking mixture of ancient ape-like features and the first whispers of something that would, millions of years later, look back at you from the mirror. Her world is lush and dangerous and alive in ways that are difficult to imagine. The Pliocene landscape around ancient Lake Turkana is not the arid scrub of the modern region. It is a rich layer mosaic, dense forest canopy dropping suddenly to open woodland thinning to golden grassland, grassland ending at the marshy, crocodile-patrolled shores of the lake. The air is thick and warm, heavy with the smell of water and vegetation. It is, by any measure, a paradise with teeth. She shares this world with Dinophelis, a saber-toothed cat roughly the size of a modern leopard, built specifically for ambushing primates, with Pachycrocuta, a giant hyena the size of a lion capable of crushing bone, with crocodilians that exceed 6 meters. She is not at the top of the food chain. She has never been, and she knows it, in the marrow, in the scan of the eyes at every sound, in the instinct to be never, ever, completely alone. Before we go any further into this story, if you're new here, this is what we do. Every week we travel back into the human past and find the moments that made us. The choices, the losses, the adaptations that quietly built everything civilization would one day rest on. If that's the kind of story you want more of, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Because where we're going next is even further back, and you don't want to arrive late. And while you're here, drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We read every single one. Now, let's follow her into the day she was born. Picture a typical morning, 4.2 million years ago, at the edge of what will one day be named the Turkana Basin. The group does not sleep on the ground. The ground, at night, is death. Instead, they climb, wedging themselves into the forks of trees, pressing their bodies together for warmth and safety. The juveniles sleep closest to the adult females, tucked against their chests or sprawled across their laps. The dominant male sleeps at the highest point he can reach, half-sitting, one arm looped around a branch. Nobody sleeps deeply. The forest makes sounds all night, and every one of them means something. By morning they forage, and they forage together, not because togetherness is pleasant, but because a lone hominid in this landscape is a target. Together, multiple sets of eyes scan the tree line constantly. The moment one individual stiffens or alarm calls, the whole group responds within seconds. What they eat tells us a great deal about who they are. Isotopic analysis of their fossilized tooth enamel reveals a diet dominated by C3 plant foods, the fruits, leaves, seeds, and fibrous underground storage organs of woodland and forest environments. They have not yet made the dietary leap that later species will make. The shift toward open grassland grasses and the protein-rich animal foods that will eventually fuel the explosion of the human brain. Anamensis is a woodland creature, and a careful one. She knows which trees bear fruit in which season. She knows where the water is cleanest. She knows the smell of a predator's kill from 200 meters. Their communication is rich, but it is not language, not yet. They use gesture, facial expression, touch, and vocalization in combinations that researchers compare to the most sophisticated non-human primate communication systems known today. A reach of the hand toward another's back initiates grooming. A specific call warns of aerial predators, another of ground-based ones. An infant's cry produces an immediate response in every adult female in the group. These are not reflexes. They are meanings, shared and understood. A proto-language of the body and the voice. And binding all of it together, the long-term social bond. These are not animals that form temporary alliances for mating and dissolve afterward. They live in stable groups for years. They have histories with one another. Favours owed, griefs shared, loyalties tested. This is what makes them different from most animals of their era, and it is precisely what makes the death of one group member so disruptive. Now zoom in, away from the group, slightly. One individual has not been foraging all morning. The younger male, perhaps 4 years past adolescence, not yet at his full size, has remained close to the place where the female's body lies. He moves toward her now. Crouching low, he reaches out and touches her face with the back of his hand. Then her arm, then her shoulder. He holds his hand there for a long moment, then withdraws it. He makes a sound, low, strained, rising toward the end, cut short. Something between a bark and a moan. 2 members of the group glance over from their foraging. A female looks. Then she looks away. A juvenile pauses, stares, then moves on. The younger male does not move away. He sits down beside the body. He does not forage. He does not look at the tree line. He just sits there, in the dust and the leaf litter, at the edge of everything he knows. Something is wrong, and the whole group knows it. What happens next is where the science goes quiet, and where the oldest part of your humanity begins to speak. Let's be direct about what we don't know. Australopithecus anamensis left no burial sites, no ochre-stained earth, no grave goods, no deliberate placement of the dead. The fossil record at 4.2 million years ago is almost entirely silent on the question of how hominids responded to death, because deliberate burial, as an archaeological signature, does not appear in the human record until roughly 120,000 years ago. For the 3 million year gap between Anamensis and the first formal burials, we are working with inference, analogy, and the careful application of evolutionary biology. And what that science tells us is far more remarkable than ceremony. What science does give us is a window through our closest living relatives. The chimpanzee shares 98.7% of our DNA, a figure so staggering that some taxonomists have argued, only half-jokingly, that chimpanzees should be reclassified within the genus Homo. And when chimpanzees lose a group member, what happens is consistent, documented, and impossible to dismiss. In 1972, at the Gombe Stream Research Centre in Tanzania, Jane Goodall documented the death of a high-ranking adult male chimpanzee named Hugo. The group's response was not chaos. It was something more disturbing and more familiar. The group gathered around the body. They touched it. They approached and retreated. They stared. One adult male charged toward the corpse, not in aggression, researchers now believe, but in what looked functionally identical to the human response of striking a table or a wall in the first moments of terrible news. Denial. Impotent rage at an incomprehensible fact. But it was the mothers who truly changed the scientific conversation. Across multiple field sites and multiple decades, researchers have now documented chimpanzee mothers carrying the mummified remains of deceased infants for days, weeks, and in some cases months after death. They groom the bodies. They share food with them. They defend them from other animals. The leading explanation is no longer confusion. It is something more precise and more devastating. These mothers know, on some level, that the infant is dead. They carry the body anyway, because putting it down is a thing that, for now, they simply cannot do. Scientists believe these behaviours are not unique to chimpanzees. They are the expression of a deep primate inheritance, one that Australopithecus anamensis shared. The neurological infrastructure required for long-term social attachment, the oxytocin-based bonding system, the amygdala's encoding of individual faces, the reward circuitry that fires in the presence of a known and trusted companion, all of this was present and active in our ancestors' brains 4.2 million years ago. The brain was smaller, but the connections it formed were real. And when those connections were severed by death, the pain was real too. Now here is where survival enters the picture, and where the story becomes a crisis. Because a body is a danger. It is the most potent scent signal in the canopy ecosystem. Within hours, the smell of death would travel hundreds of meters through that humid air, advertising itself to every predator in the region. Dinophilis could detect it. Pachycrocuta, with a sense of smell 10 times more sensitive than a dog's, would cover ground quickly to reach it. And where carrion is, predators gather. And where predators gather, the animals nearby become prey. Stay by the body, and the group risks the predators that the body attracts. Move away, and the group abandons something that every instinct in them insists still matters. Stay or move. This is the oldest choice in the human story. They moved. Evidence of what they would have done comes not from Anamensis itself, but from the behavioural logic of every social primate that followed. They moved, but not cleanly, not all at once. Several individuals lingered. The younger male, almost certainly, was last. He looked back, and in that look, that single, brief, biologically costly act of hesitation, is the seed of everything that would eventually become burial, ritual, mourning, and memory. Here is what made Australopithecus anamensis remarkable. Not for what they did in the moment of death, but for what dying, repeated 10,000 times across 10,000 generations, eventually shaped them into. Evolutionary thanatology, the scientific study of animal death response, has established a clear pattern across species. The more complex the social structure, the more elaborate and sustained the response to a dead group member. Solitary animals largely ignore their dead. Loosely social species show brief curiosity. But in primates with stable, long-term social groups, in gorillas, bonobos, chimpanzees, and the hominids that preceded us, the response is extended, behavioural, and appears to carry genuine psychological weight. The reason is brutal in its logic. In a species where group cohesion is the primary survival mechanism, every member of the group represents years of invested relationship. That individual knows where food is cached in lean months. That individual has groomed you, defended your offspring, and shared warmth on cold nights. Their death is not just a loss of one body, it is a loss of everything encoded in the relationship between you and them. A loss for which the social brain, tuned over millions of years to the presence of this specific individual, has no immediate template for processing. In other words, grief, in its most basic neurological form, is not a malfunction. It is the brain's accurate assessment that something important, something it has spent years organising itself around, is now irreversibly gone. Scientists now believe that Australopithecus anamensis possessed precisely this kind of social brain, one tuned to individuals, capable of something functionally equivalent to grief, and organised around relationships that persisted across years. The fossilised remains from canopoids show significant sexual dimorphism between males and females, a body size ratio suggesting complex hierarchies, long-term mating relationships, and intergenerational bonds. These were not interchangeable. They were irreplaceable. And when one of them died, the group did not simply reconfigure the way a flock of birds splits and reforms around an absence. Something in them resisted the reconfiguration. Something insisted on acknowledgement. That insistence, spread across millions of years of selection pressure, did not make early hominids weaker. It made them more cohesive. Groups that paused, that tended their dead, that maintained social rituals around loss, tended to hold together better under stress. The hesitation was adaptive. The grief was functional. And over time, it deepened, elaborated, and became the most human thing we do. Think about the last time you lost someone. Not the memorial, not the funeral, the first moment. When you found out, think about what your body did before your mind caught up. The stillness. The strange inability to move from where you were standing. The way you looked at the same point in space for a few seconds was too long. The impulse, irrational, unkillable, to go to wherever they were, to be near them, to touch them or the things they had touched, to be with other people who loved them. None of that is recent. Not one part of it was invented by civilization, by religion, or by culture. Those responses are older than language. They are older than fire. They are older than the oldest human burial ever found. In 2019, archaeologists announced the discovery of Homo naledi burial sites in the Rising Star cave system in South Africa. Deliberate placement of dead individuals, possibly with symbolic intent, dating to approximately 240,000 years ago. In Israel, anatomically modern humans at Skull Cave were buried around 120,000 years ago, placed on their sides, limbs drawn up, with traces of ochre and what may have been grave flowers. Neanderthals in the Shanidar cave in Iraq, approximately 70,000 years ago, were laid in graves that some researchers believe contained intentionally placed flowers. These are the milestones. These are the moments when the archaeological record finally catches up to the behaviour. But the behaviour itself is far older. The impulse is far older. You feel it in cemeteries. You feel it when you pass the house of someone who is no longer in it. You feel it in the strange, specific loneliness of packing up a life. There is something in you, still, persistent, unreasonable, that refuses to process death as an event and move on simply. Something that insists on the significance of the one who is gone. That something has an origin. It has an address in time and geography. It lives in a clearing near an ancient African lake 4.2 million years ago, in a younger male who sat down in the dust when the rest of the group went back to foraging, and stayed there for longer than survival required. The body of that hominid female was left at the edge of the lake 4.2 million years ago. The group moved on because they had to, because the predators were real and the night was coming. And survival is the one argument that has no counter. But they looked back. Evidence suggests they always looked back. We know this not from her bones, which have long since become the earth itself. We know it from ours. From the way grief arrives before thought. From the way the loss of a person reshapes every room they ever stood in. From the way that 4.2 million years of evolution have still not produced in us the ability to simply close the file. We are built to attach. We are built to lose. And we are built, slowly, painfully, in the clearing and the dark and the company of others who understand, to carry it forward anyway. She survived. Not herself, but in every one of us who has ever sat beside something we weren't ready to leave. That's what death looked like 4.2 million years ago. A lot like it looks today. 4 million years ago, a younger male sat in the dust beside someone he had lost, and stayed longer than he needed to. You just did the same thing. You stayed for 12 minutes with people who died before language existed. And if you felt something watching that, if some part of this story felt less like history and more like memory, that feeling is exactly what this channel is built on. Subscribe to Hominid Echoes right now. Every single week we go further back. We find the moments that made you. The first tool, the first fire, the first word spoken by a human mouth. The story of your species is the greatest story ever lived, and we are only getting started. Now, the comments section below. 2 things we want to know. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city, your country, your corner of the planet. And which part of this video hit you hardest? Was it the younger male who wouldn't leave? The chimpanzee mothers who couldn't put their infants down? The moment you realized your grief is 4 million years old, and not a flaw, but a feature. Tell us. The best answers will shape what we cover next.